Jordan, could we take questions?
Sure. I recorded that members Dosart and Meridew were absent, all other members are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay, short circuited it.
There.
Okay. Public comments. I do see public this time. Are there any comments that are not on the agenda that people would like to come forward and speak to?
Speaker for everyone, please.
Okay, none, I hear nothing, so we'll move on to the next item. Approval of minutes of 2/2/15 and 3/2/15. Let's start with 2/2/15. Good.
Great.
Oh, here they come. We started without them. Okay. Does anybody have comments about this meeting? I have a minor comment.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is on which one?
On February 2nd. Thank you. This second paragraph, CCAC recommended WRNS but expressed concern about their concern about the police consultant. I think, what actually happened is we didn't express concern. I think WRNS we're working something out, and we were going to do with whatever they wanted to do. So it wasn't that CCAC expressed concern. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that we were okay with anything that WRNS proposed. That's all. I read the minutes. Well,
I'll
okay.
move that we approve them.
Thank you. And the second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Disapproved or? Okay, fine. I didn't go through the preliminary first. We went through this. First of all, I wanted to just say how happy we are, with the team. I think I expressed the comments of everybody that, the feelings of everybody that we're so pleased with the way the process went. You came to do everything that we wanted you to do. We turned the corners. It was just amazing, what you did, and we had some special requests, and you did that. So I hope I'm expressing everybody's feelings that you're so happy with it. And welcome.
Thank you so much. We actually feel the same. It was a great set of, I know there were formal interviews, but it really had a good feeling in the exchange, and we are thrilled to be here. So thank you very much.
Yeah. We're thrilled too. So the honeymoon period is over.
Get to work.
Everybody get to work, right?
That was it, okay? So we'll proceed.
Enjoy it.
Okay, we approve the minutes, regular agenda item. Okay, 4A, Civic Center design input. Okay. Gordon, would you like to explain this, or
Sure,
should
I'd be happy to. The purpose of the meeting today, we had, by the way, you just followed, and some of you came in a little early, you just followed a 2-hour staff kickoff meeting in which Paul had prepared an agenda with a lot of detailed information to be able to get them started, and we discussed a number of issues, and I will send this out so that you're all aware of it. Just to make sure they understand the communications protocols. Things will go through me for the city side, they'll go through Pauline for the consultant side, including all of their 16 sub-consultants, things like that. And then we've gone over additional information that the city is still providing, like we're going to have the geotechnical work starting in a couple weeks, and hazardous materials analysis and things like that. I'm fortunate that Steve had some thoughts, as did the city manager, on some of the larger issues. So I've captured those in here. They are not. It is the list, starting with the underground garage and how to the process of checking in with the council is by no means exhaustive, but it was meant to make sure that the CCAC understood. We recognize that there's a lot of things to be done. When you're just starting off designing, even though they put in quite a bit of effort in thinking about the process. We have an adopted master plan. Changes to that obviously may be proposed by the consultant. That would have to go back to the CCAC for you to review, and if you endorse it, then it would have to go to city council, because the council's already adopted that master plan, so they can make changes to it. But there are a lot of other issues, and the earlier some of these issues are decided, the better will be the process in terms of what they can produce. As we saw the last time, we were all enthralled with the master plan, and it was like, don't worry about the water line, we'll deal with it later. Now's later, so we're having to deal with that. So this is your opportunity, and by no means it's not the only opportunity. They're going to be attending all of our meetings. So as you're out in the community, a major role of this committee is outreach. Even though you have an outreach subcommittee, you're all out and about in the community. You meet people, at the grocery store, and you meet them at church, and you meet them as you're walking your dog, and that's great because you're out there collecting information and bringing that to the committee, and you'll be in the lead in terms of helping guide them in how to get that information that they are developing back out to the community, much like we did for the neighborhood meetings that we had in preparation of the master plan. So they're here. I know there was some concern of some of the members that they weren't able to attend today, and it wasn't like, sorry, you snooze, you lose. That's it. No more input. It's there'll be continuous interaction between us, the town team, which includes the CCAC, and the WRNS team, and you notice they didn't bring all of their sub-consultants today purposely. This was to define those roles and to help us move forward.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Okay, this is my it's interesting that you had a meeting before this because our concern is what do we do as CCAC to help expedite this project, and what are our responsibilities, and what do we do? So it appears that staff has outlined or listed several items that we need to talk about the CCAC. And I guess what we didn't know is that as each decision is made by us, it needs to go to council, and that takes time. So we need to decide these things. It goes to council, and then they decide on whether it's okay or not. For example, my hot button item right now is the water line, as you know from all the emails. I don't understand how WRNS can proceed without us deciding on the water line issue. So once we decide on that, we all decide whether we move it or not move it or pursue it. What are the cost benefits? What are the ROIs on this? Which we don't know yet. It needs to go to council. But in the meantime, WRNS has a time frame of 2 months to do the master plan and look at the master plan. So I think that we need to look at some of these items and make a decision. Some of them are more important than others. I think the train station location, to me, I think that can be deferred. But I think today, I'm wondering, are we going to make a decision or make a recommendation to council on some of these items that you've identified on your list? Is that the intent?
I certainly want Pauline to talk about this, but my thought, some of these, their work is defined in phases, and the phases themselves will go to city council for review. But so the individual decisions on these will not necessarily go formally, but George sends out a weekly memorandum to city council, and if there's output from the CCAC that we want to take forward to city council, you can say, well, here's our decision. I would write a memo, I'd give it to George. George would send it out to city council, and that way city council is at least informed. And
the council's approved the master plan already, and it's got a design. It doesn't have an underground garage. The underground garage is just a add alternate, so that's not part of the master plan. If the CCAC decides, given the water line and issue and the way the master plan's looking up, we're going to build separate buildings, and we really don't want to do an underground garage, and so we're going to modify the master plan and reshape it a bit to address the water line. That theoretically would matriculate up to the council, get their blessing, and come back down. But we're not looking for council approval on moving the train station or what to do with the water line or what to do with the underground garage. All we're looking for is feedback from the CCAC as the project moves along. The council will be involved all the way along. It's not like you have to stop everything and then get an approval from the council and then come back down.
I think for us today, it's the first time we're going to get to have a conversation with you all, and it's important for us to know not only what you liked and didn't like about the last work with HMC and that master plan, but also what we may have presented that was in the right direction or not in the right direction. So for us, it would be important to talk through all of that, and maybe some of these start to become part of that conversation. The importance of the town hall and what its use might be, and that would help us to get a sense of your past conversations and then the priorities, because everything is going to be in balance, right? We know that something will have to give and be prioritized a little differently. So for us, and we have Cody with Sherwood here today to listen to, because the water line, you're right, is a really critical component. We were talking this morning about what that might mean if it doesn't move, right? Do you want that million or whatever, 2 million to go into a different type of building, or to move it? And what advantage can you take of it as a resource? We would, we'll need to know that. Since that won't be known till maybe the end of this month, we will just work around it. So we'll spend our first weeks trying to understand the program, the priorities of that program, and all the other elements as much as possible.
We won't know that till the end of this month?
I believe in
What's
terms of the
governing that?
easement, right?
The SFPUC has a project review process, which I've already initiated by sending all the background information on this project to them, and it depends. I'm waiting to hear back from them as to whether the meeting is on like the 28th of April or the 7th of May or something like that. Which we may not have an answer at that point either, but at least at that point we'll introduce it, and there is still some question. I believe I know what the city's position is vis-a-vis the easement for the water line, which is they don't have one. But there's some question about that, and I have to meet with the town attorney, and they may be able to still produce documentation. As of this point, they have not been able to produce documentation indicating that they have a legitimate easement. All they have is a permit to have the water line installed. Now, having said that, moving that water line, it depends how hard we want to pound on that. If they have no easement, theoretically, we can say, hey, you have no easement, remove your water line. Obviously.
But it's not going to be a quick solution.
Right. They're a large government agency. We're going to have to work that out. We don't want to not have the residents of Atherton have water. That's, that provides the water. So, taking a hard line approach is not in anyone's best interest, but we have to work that out. We're going to have to define where the easement is going to be and how big it is, and that will obviously have an impact. But what Pauline is saying is, where the line is and how big it is has nothing to do with how many square feet, we're going to need for the library or the police department or whatever. So they have lots of other things they can do in terms of doing their design work.
But doesn't it impact whether they're going to split the buildings up? Because
Sure.
originally we did not have it split up. Doesn't it impact the underground garage?
But that's an issue that's independent of the water line also. The proposal to split the buildings was made independent of the water line as well as in connection with it. So there's other reasons to split the buildings than just the water line. Gordon, when we met with Michael Carlin, he said we could move it. The issue was who pays to move it.
Right. And nothing has changed in that regard. They're still interested, although it's jumping ahead, because I've been having conversations a couple of times a week with various people there. The last conversation, or maybe not last, but one of them from one of their operations people was, to the best of his knowledge, the SFPUC has never paid to have one of their water lines moved for the benefit of someone else.
And does
No
that,
surprise.
does that impact any of how we move forward right now today? The fact that we know that they're not going to pay for this?
It will eventually, but
Yeah.
in order to make that decision, we need to have a little bit more in our arsenal to make that decision. One is design. What's going to be a good fit for the building locations on the site, and how much money do we want to devote to moving a water line as opposed to something else that we're going to pay for. And there'll be some cost-benefit analysis to that.
I think we'll have to make some assumptions for the next weeks. You're right. We won't be able to move really far if we don't get something in the next month. but we could maybe start with an assumption, which may, if there is no absolute written word on it, may serve as a card. Like, we would like 20 feet because that actually helps us with the dimension that'll work for the library in this location. Or 20, you know, we would assume 10 feet off the center, whatever it is. We might try to design it with that in mind. And then that could be something that when you're in conversation with them, you could speak to that number. If they don't have an absolute 40 feet, 20 feet, 15 feet. So we'll try to work around it. It's not the best, but I think there's enough for us to do on the specifics of the library, the organization and adjacencies of the program, as Adam was showing, that it'll fill up our month.
Okay.
But you're right, we'll soon need to know that if in order to get to whittling down the options.
Would it be efficient to go through this list as it stands now? I'm sure this list would change over time, but to tell us when you need this information in order for you to proceed efficiently without wasting your time. You know, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 issues that staff has written, and keeping in mind that some of these are sort of recommended to go to council or not. You know, I was unclear on your answer on that, but, you know, you may need to go to council on some of this. You know, I was told before this meeting that if we decided as a group, CCAC, that we would not approve the relocation of the water line, that we would still have to go to council to have council accept that decision.
Well, Rose, what we just heard from George is George will handle the communication with the council without having to go to a council meeting.
Okay.
But
So
if the outcome is we're throwing out the old master plan and here's your new one, that's going to go to the council. But if it's a modification and reshaping, and the council's had an opportunity to be involved and participate, they all know about the water line issue, so they're familiar with the issues, and I can communicate those. That's not a problem.
Okay. So do we need some end dates on this, or are you satisfied that it can just go for a month without information on this?
I think we're satisfied that we could use our month productively in some deeper dives of different elements of the program, and in vetting after this conversation what comes out of it. Again, the likes and dislikes even of what we showed. So I think we're pretty comfortable that that's reasonable. It would be great if not to go through this list specifically, just to know the group's thought on underground garage or above ground parking preferences, level of sustainability in preference, just to understand the range, if not to understand the absolute decision. Because again, we haven't had a chance to chat with you guys this informally, right? It's been sort of in an interview setting, which isn't as helpful for us to hear what grew what we saw with the HMC drawing. So I think we can use this list or whatever you have. Adam's got his PowerPoint, which he showed, and we've got drawings on the table to mark over. The more we can gain, and again, really for us to listen, the better. And that'll give us a lot for the next 3 weeks.
Okay, good. So with that said, do we want to first talk about the underground garage? Any thoughts and comments that they can use in their next?
Well, could I hop in on that before we go right to a specific garage element? Because it's kind of an interesting thing. What we showed, and again, we'd love to get your feedback on what we presented over the last month, but the underground garage could tie into a one-story scheme or a two-story scheme, right? Which could tie into an idea about a real civic space or not a civic space, you know? So it's really hard to kind of look at one element necessarily and say yes or no. There's maybe what I'd love to hear is maybe before we get into the specifics of an actual architectural element is maybe more of a stepping back a little bit and just talking about some of the committee's thoughts on the civic space.
Maybe you should remind everyone
love
of
to
the
do that.
options,
I would love to
so
do
that
that.
that's fresh in our minds,
Sure.
and then people can give you their.
Because then we got something to look at and we can say, gosh, you know, that the idea of underground. We've got hard copies here, but I could also go to the projector. I think
Or should we spread these out on?
absolutely.
Are these new concepts or?
No, no, this is everything that we showed before, and even if you wanted to go back to what you all liked, aside the HMC master plan, I think that would be.
Maybe Meadow Revised, do you want Meadow Revised or Meadow?
Oh, those are the options.
Sure, I could.
Yeah, there's three.
Yeah,
These two the same? No, no.
they're a little
Meadow.
bit. There's a one-story option.
Why don't you go with Revis 1 and 2?
So there's, yes, I want to start with kind of the way what we presented to you, which had to do with, well, that's what, yeah, we kind of threw a lot.
So are you gonna throw them up on?
We'll throw them up on the screen too.
Okay, that's actually. Turn that one around.
Yeah, so, this way. So the first option we showed was a one-story option. I'm gonna say, everything on the site was a one-story building. And the idea was putting the police station into kind of two large masses, City Hall, an underground parking structure, would be beneath that, and then a library that was actually reduced in its overall new program and then appended to this building here. And the real kind of test was how much of the site does the new construction take up, and then what are the benefits of having that parking underground. The other really key element that actually kind of moved into a later scheme was this idea about the whole civic space facing the train tracks. And I think we kind of played our hand and said, you know, we looked at that being oriented this way, but also later on we looked at a scheme that actually flipped it, because we heard a lot from this committee and actually from some of the council members that they might have done that backwards, you know, because there's a train that comes by here every 4 or 5 minutes at rush hour, and we don't really use that space. That's a huge issue for the overall configuration of the building and the planning of it, and whether the parking would be below grade.
There are people in the community who think that we're gonna get rail service back here, and they want to retain that parking area. We've heard in the rail committee many times, I'm one member. There are others on the rail committee that it's not gonna happen. So, it's still divided.
Who determines that in the long run? Isn't it Caltrain?
No, it's our parking lot.
No, I mean to say, who determines whether or not they stop at our
Oh, it's
station?
Caltrain.
Yeah, and isn't the use and ridership going through the roof right
As soon as
now?
they electrify, we get our trains, our service back.
Well, that's not
One a day.
exactly clear. Yeah, one a day.
One a day.
Okay,
That sounds
let's keep
cool.
going, because then she'll give you people.
Go ahead.
realistic feedback.
So that was kind of that first idea. Then we wanted to go to a two-story option on the police station, and based on our conversations with the consultant, police consultant, that actually had some great benefit to going that route. And some of the other key benefits of going to a two-story police station, which Meadow Revised does, is that it's a essential services building. There was some cost considerations to that, where you could actually say that if this is your police station here, that's one construction cost. You put a construction joint, and then what you have here is your city hall and all of that, separate as a one-story.
And that's admin, city hall. and
Admin, city hall, council chambers as a possibility.
And if I may jump in, when he says essential facilities, the seismic requirements are much more stringent for that. So, you know, the one building, let's say, can move 8 inches in a 7 on the Richter scale, and the city hall maybe can move 12 inches. So if you have them, if they're in the same building, obviously you can't build one building to 2 different standards. So that's what he was saying, is there's an advantage to having the police building physically be separated from the rest of the facilities.
Right, and just to remind everyone of the existing master plan, everything was kind of in one building. The library was the only other building that was pulled out, which we took as a starting point. The fact there might be some savings if we were to look at it going back.
And the water line on these,
And the water line, good point. So the water line, actually, can I pull the water line?
Yeah.
Here it is.
the small one?
So the water line, this is both the same drawing, but we've overlaid some information on it. This is the existing site, and what you see here in blue is the water line. We have a survey now that kind of shows us where that is. That's really that blue thin line, and what you see here, the fat line, is a guesstimate at an easement. We don't know exactly how big that is, but it kind of tells you can't build right on the water line.
Is that 20 feet?
This is actually, we were very conservative. We went 30 feet.
Yeah. By the way, they've asked in their initial thing, if they
Yeah,
don't
just-
have an easement, well, we like 50 feet. And I said, you know, when pigs fly, essentially. But,
If you don't ask, you don't get.
yeah, exactly.
And we just wanted to start conservative with that. And we're looking at our civil engineer here, he's nodding.
I'm nodding.
Which is a good sign.
Okay,
Good sign.
okay.
So he started with that, we felt good.
You can do this too.
Yeah. But it might get better for us, but we thought we would start with that, just to kind of look at it. So then what we've overlaid here, what you see in the dark color is the road plan that we had, our asphalt plan, our driveways, just to see what that would be like and where it would overlay on the water line. And what it kind of shows you when we didn't overlay our exact library on it. But the library, as we proposed, many of these actually would sit over that in certain cases, right? And we talked about that in, I think, during the interviews, that there's a possibility that we would have to revise this so that to avoid the water line, you'd want to build your library there as one option, which we think is definitely possible we want to look at first. It would avoid that. We felt that was good. The other idea we had that was a little bit on the challenge side would be, is there a way to move it to the north of this line, but there's just very little room. We were thinking, is there something you could do here?
Change the parking.
But what you start to do is you get this really long, narrow building configuration. We thought there's some benefits to that, maybe being used as a sound wall to the site, but it just seems, based on some initial dimension, calculations, anything on that side of the line is going to be very, very challenging.
We'd have to eat into the parking.
Exactly. We lose a lot of that.
I'm curious, you can't put green over water, you can't have anything over water line?
You can't.
You can't have
Yeah.
park?
Yeah, it's just occupied space.
Oh,
You can have road, you can have park, you can have parking.
oh,
It gets really tricky when building footings and foundation systems sitting over stuff
Yeah.
like that. I think some of these
Just
issues
goes into the water line.
Right, yeah, you got big problems.
Definitely.
no.
So, every one of our schemes, we do either hit the line or we're in that easement. Every single one of them the library does, because we were, based off our initial, we didn't have this information up front, but we kind of had a feeling that was gonna be the case. So there'll be some adjustment to all the proposed, that location, and it's gonna have to migrate closer to town hall and engage a little bit farther to the west. And so back to this, the kind of overall idea.
But your first configuration of the library adjacent to the current doesn't go over the water line.
That's
Yeah,
actually,
I think
it's as close as we can probably get it, but I think it's probably,
It's pretty close.
it's pretty darn
We have
close.
to tweak
Depends on
the
these.
roadway,
Yeah, the area that's gonna be really kind of challenging is that area right
Which
there.
we could
And there are ways we can
go
kind of,
around that.
we can work it, and one of the aspects of this drawing, it also shows where heritage trees are and the water line together, which are the no-goes
Tricky,
that's fine,
tricky.
which we're trying to avoid. Exactly. So, again, one idea of a civic space facing the tracks, right, which is separate from a central pedestrian space, which is separate from a pocket park or the reading park. This idea just goes opposite is that it's really kind of one large space that starts to tie all of the buildings together. Very, very different ideas of how that civic space might be.
Parking underground.
Parking underground, parking above ground. And those are the two kind of real extremes we presented.
But that one has some serious water line issues.
It does.
This one has serious water line
Right there.
issues, right? But that's not to say we could, you could say, well, this scheme with above grade parking, and we can go through all of those challenges, right? Is cost effective. Maybe that might help kind of rearrange some of the water line. There could be a conversation about, well, this library then can actually start to become more part of it. So there's things we can start to do to arrange this or tweak these to get them so that we're hitting the key elements.
So what I heard you say, and I think one of the concerns is that when we thought about flipping stuff in buildings, so let's say the back of the buildings would be by the train tracks, with the water line, that's gonna make it very difficult.
More challenging, yeah, we'd have to really take parking away and it'll be thinner building. I think we could still draw something and look at it, but it's,
So would it be, saving the water line where it is and then doing underground parking, or above ground parking and moving the water line?
no, I mean, I think we could blend pieces of both schemes if we were, so we could look at it if you save the water line, what could you build on that side of it, right? and then you could look at what Dee Dee's saying, and if you built on the other side, what kind of piece could be on that side, and what could fit in there?
Mhm.
Could administration fit there? Because it would be a thinner building, and that would work out in terms of light penetration. Does that actually help make a town center? I mean, all of that. So I think we haven't had a chance to study it well, but we could if that was, because that's an option. And I think we'd want to study everything you could do, assuming that our assumptions will work with the negotiations. How much land do you have left, right? And not move the water line. And then you go to, okay, we're spending a lot of money and not getting a place that we like,
Mhm.
so we need to spend the $1 or $2 million. And is that worthwhile?
Mhm.
How much parking space can we get keeping the water line there? Do you know how large the underground parking space can be?
I think we initially looked at about 25 spaces as would be dedicated to the police, to the police entirely.
Was that,
That's secured parking.
That is correct.
is that secured parking sufficient, 25 spaces? I can't remember.
That'd be pretty close,
Okay.
And that was an initial number we kind of pulled from the master plan document. That they had set up, I think, there was surface parking. So we took that and it actually does fit under the building footprint, a two-story footprint that we looked at actually pretty nicely, with a little bit of leftover room for some other program that you could put underneath there as well.
So I have to start you guys with the, I think you need to think about underground and not underground.
Mm-hmm.
I guess for me, you're gonna be hearing the voice of committed donors. There is not $1 committed for underground parking yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to be pretty realistic on what the donors are gonna pay for. So, yeah, what I am also hearing from them is surface parking and screen the stuff so nobody sees it. And that's so that the neighborhood doesn't see it. So I think we need to be very aware of that. And I think that if I was to surface the idea with the current committed donors about moving the water line, their answer would be leave the bloody water line where it is. We're not paying $2 million or $3 million to do that. They don't care what it looks like.
Although if moving it is principally benefiting the library, then we may not need to go to the donors.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Oh, the wet wee wee.
Well, yeah, so I think we need to be aware of a lot of floating pieces here.
Well, we have $12.5 million library dollars that we need to use.
Right.
So, and we know that a 10,000 square foot building or 9,000 square foot building isn't gonna cost that kind of money.
Shouldn't.
We can do our best,
We
but
also
it's probably not
have
gonna.
uses for that document.
Well, we have some site work, clearly,
We have site work, we have this building that
and we have this building.
Might be part of that.
Part of the
And we-
library and get it.
Right.
So we're gonna spend the money.
Yeah.
Gordon, can I ask a simple question on the water line? This was the section of the water line that did not have the easement. This section does.
Well, let's see if I can explain it. This is. Sorry.
Red pen?
The town granted a license or a permit to construct and operate this water line in 1936. And it covered, and said basically, you put it in the road right of way, and this was road right of way,
Came up to Ashfield.
up to Ashfield. It's not clear that this was road right of way. The road might have gone this way, and I haven't gone back to look at, old photographs, but this clearly wasn't right of way at the time because it was a lot. This was a parcel owned by the SP Railroad. The town didn't buy that till 1968. The deed that the town received makes no mention of an easement. The deed that the SFPUC got from SP Railroad in 1936 does mention an easement. So, not a lawyer, I don't know what happened, whether by not putting it in, when the town bought it, nobody said, hey, by the way, there's an easement there, you have to reserve, there were no rights reserved to the SFPUC in the document that was granted to the town, and we own this. I don't know, does that easement, because it predates the town and it was granted, is it still there? Is it not there? I'm going under the assumption that it's not there, because it's not in our deed and it's not in our title, and maybe we go back to the title company from 1968 and say, oh, it's your problem.
If we're granted, if somebody grants an easement in 1936, does it carry it down whether it's mentioned or not?
My understanding is from the city attorney, if they didn't record that easement, with the transfer, it's as if it doesn't exist.
So, this is the section we're arguing about with them about moving.
Right.
This is the section they have something documenting that they have the
But
right
what
to
they
be
have is a permit.
Right, which we could revoke.
Which we could revoke.
Right.
Now, we can revoke it, to the extent that they have a right to be in the right-of-way, but if we move the right-of-way, the position would likely be, please move your water line to stay within the right-of-way. So, I wish it were clearer.
That's gonna make the project be 2 or 3 years later because they don't do anything, any kind of.
Well, and that's why, we wanna meet with them and say, here's what we would like, and if we can reach agreement quickly, whether it's to leave the line and but we're only gonna give you a 12-foot easement, let's say. As I said, they want 50, we might end up giving them, 5 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other, so that they have the ability to bring in an excavator and fix their line. Because again, we want water, Palo Alto wants water, Menlo Park wants water, and Stanford wants water in perpetuity. Assuming that.
What is there?
If it's there, exactly. But we're not gonna, that's not the issue. There's also an issue, and part of the reason Rick and I met with him is, if we want to use the water in that line and the temperature that's in that line as part of a heat exchange system, we want them to continue to flow water in there, because if they're not flowing water, we may not be able to take advantage of that heat, which may have a value long-term to the town. So that's the issue. So this part, easement was granted 1936 by the railroad, doesn't show up in our title in 1968. This part, the permit is still, valid, even though it's 80 years later, but it's a permit issued by the town. It's not an easement, it's not a right-of-way, it's a permit.
I'm just curious, can the part that's not in anybody's document from the early 1930s, could that be a negotiating point?
Yes,
Getting them
that's
to-
basically what I'm saying. We would say to the PUC, we want to grant you an easement, we want the water, but the easement's only gonna be 15
Oh, I
feet
see, so
wide.
that's,
Were there dimensions on that initial easement?
I'm gonna have to go back and look at the document. I don't remember that there were.
Be curious. For you, it's not gonna shrink.
But I don't remember that there was.
So having dealt with this entity, what are your feelings about reaching a resolution by the end of the
The people that I talked to, and the mayor and I met with their general manager, I guess it is. They when you get higher up, they're pretty reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
You get lower down, it's like, we need 50 feet right away. So I think we will reach an agreement. We have to. We don't have to. I suppose we could leave it, but I wouldn't want to leave it as murky as it is now going forward. So that we're, the people that are sitting in these seats 60 years from now are going to say, well, let's see, what are we going to do with it? So I think we'd want to define, what the rights are as of now, just like they did in 1936 and 1968, define them. They'll have to deal with those 60 years hence, but.
Okay, plan B, what if they don't come with an answer in 30 days or 1 month?
Well, that's a question for our attorney.
Because that's
25
what
feet.
we need.
25
Oh, it's identified. Total width.
Because I sent a copy to you.
No obstruction of any kind whatsoever shall be placed in front of nor within 25 feet of.
25 feet of.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
You can continue to read.
Yeah, okay.
Total.
Because if that's 25 feet from the center line, that's
Yeah.
Right.
that's 50 feet. So.
Plan B. Okay. Okay, well, I'm just trying to get this information, cause I know how you need information to get going, and I'm a little anxious, so this is my concern.
Gordon, what was your estimate of the cost to move this thing?
Round numbers, $1 million.
Just $1 million?
Yeah.
Just $1 million. That'll do it for the whole length,
No, we don't have to do the whole lane.
just that portion.
We just have to do the
Go
portion.
from about here to Fair Oaks,
The northern portion.
because there's a tie-in at Fair Oaks.
And there's some trade-offs, because it's an 80-year-old pipe, it's steel, they wanna replace it. You know, I mean, there are all kinds of discussions around it. Maybe they provide the pipe, we bear the costs to do the trenching, you know.
Great timing.
We can definitely move it, he told us.
Yeah.
They'll have no problem with us moving it.
The only issue there is that
It's a
obviously
cost issue.
it's cost, and we have to, within a reasonable period of time, make sure we can provide water. So there may be
We can't have it shut off.
a 6-inch bypass line has to be put in for a little while, for the 3 days, because welding around a 3-foot pipe is gonna be, take a while.
And permitting isn't going to be elongated, because they said they,
I wouldn't think so. That, and that, again, that's the reason for getting
right,
that meeting on whichever it's, in the next month.
right.
I was just about to mention that. I don't know that it's a safe assumption to say that the project timeline and duration wouldn't be affected by moving the water line. I think the safe assumption is that it would be.
Just by how much, we don't know.
By how much we don't know, and it's, I couldn't tell you an approximate time, but I can guarantee you it's longer than you would be comfortable with. And my assumption is that by not moving the water line, that would lessen the timeline.
Okay.
I don't know if it would remove the frustration working with the PUC, but it wouldn't put you into that sort of extended.
My experience is the same as what
Right.
you're saying.
And it may be, the resolution might be, we're gonna move the road, we're gonna have the building on this side and stay away from the line. And because it's actually, I was mentioning, it's a used pipe. They used it for the overland system prior to the Hetch Hetchy being built. So it's a 100-year-old pipe that's been installed here for 80 years. So maybe it's, okay, you guys at some point are gonna replace it, it doesn't have an infinite life. So 25 years from now, whatever, put it in underneath the road and abandon,
Yeah.
the piece, or we can abandon it. So there may be some trade-offs there.
My concern is, my position is not whether we should move it or not move it, or do this or do that. I just want all the facts on the table so that they can work, or we as a town know that there's going to be, X additional dollars impacted, and schedule impacted. That's all. We need all the facts on the table before, we jump into these things, and that's what all I'm trying to get at this point.
So I would say that the most important thing for us as a community is to build this center that is going to serve our community for 50 to 70 years in a manner that really addresses the needs of the community. And that's where we should start. Now, we may have to compromise that based on some realities that we don't have control over. But I think it's really important that we start at the point of focusing on what we're trying to do to this whole community, which is this is the largest project in the history of our town, and it's an opportunity to bring our town together around a center that we haven't had, at least since this building was first built, and those that built it, celebrated that, and that's been a long time. So I really think we need to stay focused on that big picture. This is a really big deal, and we should do it right.
We should do it right. I think that's the underlying thing, and I don't want any missteps, under our watch.
Agreed. So if I heard a few thoughts on right also includes what we know the community wants to see. So they would rather see the investment in the town in this area versus underground parking.
Yeah, I mean, I hear plenty of people that look at this parcel right now and see it basically as a parking lot.
Me too.
Yeah.
But it's a financial concern as well.
Okay.
When do we throw in Steve's
I mean, at the big picture, just to give you some feedback
Yeah.
on this,
Yeah.
I think the idea of building a center, a pedestrian center that people can relate to, and that we can do things in where we could, you know, have outdoor events in, or we can do an indoor-outdoor thing between the buildings and the outside that makes our space much more flexible and usable so it feels like a center is absolutely critical. I much prefer the idea of having a courtyard facing away from the tracks than facing toward the tracks.
That's where we wanted to go.
And I personally like the idea of a two-story police building with parking underneath it that will help shield the noise. I think that this building is going to be renovated probably with library dollars, and that therefore the idea of connecting the library to this building in some creative manner, or moving this building to where you want to put the library, is the best thing. And this is a wonderful building that people see as Atherton, so it should be used, you know, it's an important part of the center. And the final thought I have is, of the people that I talk to, people really like this idea of maximizing the sustainability. So there's, I mean, there may not be dollars for doing the underground parking because people look at that as totally boring, but there is absolutely money for doing innovative sustainability and you know, I mean, you guys worked on the library at Sacred Heart, and the donor behind that library is going to participate in this. He hasn't said anything specific about that to me, but I'm certain that you know, we have the money to do that right, and we should do it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just telling Gordon and I have been in a couple meetings, and there's buzz around two civic centers. One is in Santa Monica, and this one. And there's already a competition set up, and I was really quiet about it when it happened to be about net zero energy and water. But it was fun to hear that people are talking about this project already. And,
Wow.
And yeah, and excited about watching what's coming out of the town. So yeah, that is a real kind of buzz.
Rick, you brought up a point about the existing city or hall.
Town hall.
Yeah.
Is it a possibility to move it?
The HMC said it was easy to move because of the kind of foundation that it is.
So maybe we put that on the table, that the building's historic, but its location may not be, that we can
I
move
think
it.
The building's not,
It's not historic.
It's not
Well,
historic.
if I may, it's not on the National Register. In the EIR, any building over 45 years old is assessed, it's over 50 years, it was assessed as historic, and so one of the issues that the council will be asked in adopting the EIR is to say that, yes, the building can be renovated, but it has to be done in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines on the renovation of historic buildings. Which does look at context, it looks at mainly the exterior. Now some people will say that, you know, the exact site is important, you can't change it, but you know, you might be able to pivot it. For example, obviously then it doesn't have the alignment with the two trees, but so that, yeah, I think it certainly is within the realms of possibility to do that, even in keeping with the EIR.
It would really be nice if the side of this building, I mean, the building needs to be enlarged for whatever we're gonna do, fix it. If the side of this building could have fold back doors that could open up into the outside and share the library, the whole, people could go out of one place into the other, and this outdoor space. But if we're now have to deal with the Secretary of State's regulations for the historic building, I don't know that we're gonna be able to touch the outside of this building.
Is there a reason to have it as historic? Is that advantageous?
Any building over 50 years old is by
It has to be.
definition according to CEQA. But and I'm no expert on the Secretary of the Interior's requirements, but you know, I know certain things like the facade is typically more important than the side of the building. You have to retain the elements. So let's say because of these tall windows, you keep the opening at the top, the header, but you replace the windows with doors that are the same width. So, you know, to do that, you might have to leave the wall, I don't know, I'm not the expert, but, so it's an interesting suggestion.
Yeah, we'll look into that. Sometimes what they've advised us to do is if we were going to make an intervention, so if you're gonna cut in and do something, it has to be clearly of a different era. So it has to be modern versus of that time so that there's no confusion.
Right.
So then we just have to understand how much, because even simple things that you would think would make sense, like going from single pane windows to double pane, is very difficult because it doesn't fit in with how they define it. So we'll unpack that and try to see what the options are for moving, for opening up, and for obviously and definitely for renovating, and see try to help bracket
Because
opportunities.
we do have a study that was commissioned about 5 or 6 years ago, thereabouts, for the seismic upgrading of this building, which would be necessary for any reuse, and it was, we were saying, the $400,000 to $500,000 range at that time.
You know, to Dee Dee's point too, as far as doing something with this wall and incorporating the library, give you a chance to draw the library in closer to the town hall building and avoid that pipeline too. And just kind of, even in this plan, repositioning it, not necessarily building it behind here like you said earlier, but maybe repositioning it in here so it comes a little bit behind. So it's not like a drastic modification.
It's almost like half of the first plan and half of the second plan.
Right.
Well, right, yeah, the second plan, this one here we looked at, which starts to build off of your point, which is about how you create outdoor space that's shielded from the tracks, right? So it's kind of rotating this building, looking at what this one completely opens up to that, and there's no hiding,
Right.
You're completely exposed, but it does open up to, Fair Oaks in a nice way. This one says, no, that there's another way we can start to create a usable outdoor space and say that, this is an eddy of space, it's still a part of that, right? And that you have, this space, it's still a part of that, they're separate, they can be used by each one of these entities, but they still feel a part of something, they're not completely closed off from what we've been calling the real center and the real, I don't wanna call it the town green, but yeah, the draw from the master plan, that kind of green idea. That do these outdoor areas. And, when you create buildings that are thin like this, you get great opportunities for natural ventilation and daylight, as opposed to a larger, bigger box where you're really struggling to get light in, and it's gonna cost a lot. We can kind of break the mass of this building down into thinner pieces. It starts to capture outdoor courtyards that allows natural light to come in. It's gonna have a huge cost savings down the line on your energy use, and it's also gonna be a much nicer place to be. The width of this room right now, the light on both sides, is great. If it were 3 times as deep, it would feel really awkward and hard. You have to look for other ways to make it feel.
So in this plan, is this a 2-story building here?
That's correct.
Right.
It's a 2-story building there, so you're really putting a larger mass
Yes.
Against the major noise opportunity here, which is going to be the case for a long time. And trying to, sound, it travels by sight in a way. Line of sight is line of sound. So if there are ways you can start to, to block that, putting your largest mass closest to the tracks, has some great benefit to this area, to these neighbors as well. And also, it's just kind of an idea of identity. As you're driving this way at Fair Oaks, and you start to see a larger building there that becomes kind of more of an identity moment for the rest of your site, right? So there were some interesting ideas that were starting to grow out of this. I like what you're saying. You could really imagine this building starting to really.
It's not the second one, it's the first drawing, not that one.
The other one behind.
Circle right there. You're actually destroying the current library.
This exact.
Over
the current
library.
Yeah, exactly. The current library. Correct. Yeah, the current library would go away entirely. If they did the new library, it would possibly start to compress and maybe be organized around an outdoor space.
Right.
That might start to tie in these buildings together.
And by the way,
After this.
in the EIR, the library building also predates, it's more than 50 years old, but the opinion of the planners was it has been so extensively remodeled as to no longer have its historical character, and therefore there would be no necessary mitigation if it were demolished.
Hard to
because that could have been a problem where they said, oh no, you have to save that building too. So there are some constraints and then
Yeah.
others that we don't have to do.
So you let these people go too far, they're gonna wanna preserve the temporary building.
No, I don't think anybody can fight it at all.
So this type of study we might miss that, we don't know yet. You know, we really gotta sharpen the pencils and get in there, and Pauline's pulling out a big document here we put together, which is our graphic program.
It's for those under 25.
Well,
You can't read it, but
Years old or?
we have,
we have young people in our office. But it is just a.
Yeah.
It's called but it is just a graphic kind of blocking the different programs associated with library management. And that'll help us also understand what
Right.
really it needs to be,
right.
it needs to be tuned.
Yeah, this is the program for that library that we've drawn here. So if you took this amount of square feet, just almost 9,000 square feet, that box is made up of all these pieces put together, just for geometry. So you take that brown box is that, or rectangle is that, roughly in area, you know. So that's what we need to get on here based off of what the program is. That's our graphic program, and that's how we kind of started to delineate these boxes or pull from that.
So what can go in this building? What
Exactly.
can
So,
go in that?
you know, this is about 3,000
No.
This building?
how big is
It's around
1600.
1,600.
Yeah.
So you could imagine looking at some of these elements and saying, well, gosh, you know, there's a library reading program which is 1,500 square feet. You might have to say, okay, well then, you pull that out, this building would get smaller, right? Less of new construction, but you're pouring it into TI, there's a whole opportunity there which might start to get this building to avoid that water line with some creative maneuvering around existing heritage trees and things.
9,000 square feet for the library?
I think we're
What was
using
it-
8958.
What was in the program?
That's where we
Yeah.
were.
Well, I think that
Whether
whether
or not
not 1,000 square foot community,
Yeah,
that big.
1,500 square
So
foot.
the
community.
second
Yeah.
question is, are you using all the square footages that were in the master plan for the police department and everybody else as they were produced, without question?
Just before we got to this meeting today.
Yeah,
Because we have to start with that. And then I think what we need to do is to understand each program more and more with the expertise and the users and try to understand what built that program. So right now, we had to start with something, and so we just adopted the square footage as defined in the program.
I did share with them though that one of the tasks early on would be after they were, or as part of refining the police program, to work with the subcommittee, I think it was the budget subcommittee, on vetting that number and, you know, with the police chief looking at comparable police stations to look at, because it wasn't, the library had gone through that process with the library subcommittee coming up with the square footage. The police department hadn't, and the committee decided to put off that analysis until you had some input from the design staff, because they may say, hey, look, we can overlay this piece and that piece, or make both of these work in this one space, and therefore you don't need the, whatever, 14,732 square feet. We can do it with less. Because anyway, it's part of their charge is to make sure that we vet that.
They're all looking at me, I'm not gonna be talking about that today. Okay? But I have a couple of questions on the library program. At the time you guys vetted that, there was no discussion of coffee shop. I think that.
Correct.
Okay, so there's a
That's a
couple of
big
things that have come up
That's good.
since then that I think we need to think about from the library program, if you would let me start for the couple.
Go for it.
Okay. Coffee shop. And coffee shop could have a little bit bigger kitchen than a coffee shop, because there's talk about a program that would have cooking classes. And I think my feeling is this should all be part of the library.
Wherever, it doesn't necessarily have to be
Well,
positioned in
but-
the library, but
On the back, I mean, some way to do this,
Like an event
there's
center?
wine classes, and there's all kinds of stuff that.
So it should all be part of the library programming, is what you're
It's
saying?
all about, because that's where I'm
Part of
hearing
the
it coming
program.
from, okay, is library wants to do this.
Right.
That's awesome.
It also gives us a way to have events. in the
The
kitchen.
history room hasn't been called out. Marianne was
clearly
complaining the other
included in the
day.
library.
Okay, but it hasn't been seen someplace, she wants to see where it's in the program.
Right, there's a
Okay.
heritage room.
All right, but.
Yeah, that's it.
That would be,
That's it, okay.
And what we,
That's,
what we talked
Yeah.
about is if that includes this building, it could include a combination of this room and the bathroom as a heritage room, so.
that, that's,
Mm-hmm.
we
and.
get 450 there for that.
Which is about that square footage if you look at that combination over there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are, I think, additional things.
And
I've been hearing coming from library people that they really would find valuable for their program.
And one additional thing right along those lines is in the library, in addition to what we looked at, we're looking at including in the library this whole fiber network. There needs to be a server room, like an outdoor accessible room that ISPs would put their racks in. And we can give you some specific square footage. It's not a big room, it's a small room.
Is part of this program a couple of small conference type rooms, meeting rooms?
Yeah, that we have that in the
I
defined
don't know what
room.
your program, I mean, I didn't pay attention to your program, but I just wanna make sure that those are the things that are being talked about.
And
And
it's
it's
various
flexible
sizes,
spaces.
yeah.
Yes, they do need to be
I
flexible.
can't see from here, there were a few reading rooms and.
There, so basic, yeah, there's special seating for young adult,
Yeah,
adults.
these are the rooms here.
Right.
Oh, I see.
So the reading rooms are 600 square feet of that, and we're broken into, multiple, depending on, again, the scale and how many folks are gonna be in there. So that would be, I think there's defined reading rooms in the program.
Would the coffee shop be a coffee bar or a couple seats for 10 or?
There's a coffee shop at Mitchell Park, which has maybe 3 tables in it,
Okay.
and it feels small, but seems adequate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the concept is that there'd be an indoor-outdoor deal.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
Could open up into the outside
Yeah.
if it was raining.
Good,
there'd be
yeah.
a place to
Be-
sit.
Unless
Take a
people are
walk,
gonna be
grab a
around when
coffee.
it's raining,
But,
Oh,
yeah, but
okay.
you can always have a few, but if
The
it's
moms
not,
are
if
so
it's
excited
nice.
about that possibility.
Yeah, people like an idea of not having to go to Menlo Park to meet other people.
Right.
So you wouldn't
So
wanna be
nice.
polluted
Right.
meeting people.
For purposes of their work, what I'm hearing, just to check in, is that the coffee shop slash kitchen and the server room for the fiber optics are in addition to the 89,
That's right.
Yes.
73 square feet, okay.
And personally, I think that the concept of the cafe arrangement doesn't necessarily have to be in the library building. The library can still manage it, and it can do cooking classes in it. It just, so, I think you guys need to think about what makes the most sense for the whole.
Well,
So
there's
it's
a
coffee
place
shop
that opens
in the
up.
park.
Mhm.
Who manages the coffee shop?
We don't have a coffee shop at the park. We have a caterer vendor who manages the park and the events.
All right.
I would point out, when I was building the 20 libraries in San Jose, many of them had integrated beverage, coffee areas, so that people can buy a pre-made sandwich and a cup of coffee or something, so.
And that's exactly what they have in Mitchell Park.
Okay,
And that's
I'm
exactly
sure Tom
what
would
they
be able
have.
to provide input as to what they have
Well,
at their
and
various
look at how
locations.
successful the Capitol is.
Oh my God, yes, it's
Concept of All
crazy.
these things, it's not
Mhm.
innovative.
And people might wanna make money on this on their own and come move in.
Well,
No, coffee vendors like Phil's.
Okay.
Phil's.
Okay.
so we're adding square footage already.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, so I think we're on reuse of town hall only right now. Level of sustainability, can we talk about what information you need when in order to, help you in your design?
We're hoping you want it as green as possible. Yes, okay, good.
Well, wait a minute.
Within reason.
As of right now, people have asked for whatever the state is requiring,
Cal Green.
and they wanna see ROIs on anything above that.
Okay. So I think that is business as usual. I mean, Cal Green is pretty much it's legal, so it's one step above illegal. So that's done. So that's good. What we would do is just try to work with the budget and the program to find synergies. So if taking advantage of waste heat can be done cost effectively, we could bring that forward. I think what we're very used to, the whole team is very used to looking at this broadly. So we talked about, and I don't mean to keep bringing this up, but it's just down the street from me. So Sacred Heart took care of the civil requirements for stormwater management within its budget, which was actually pretty tight, and didn't add any more, and did it sustainably. So it's very integrated into the landscape, and it's part of the landscape. And it took money that was supposed to be for an 80-inch pipe to handle water and just spread it into landscape. So that's how we would think about this. So when Adam's talking about thinness for natural ventilation, it's also taking mechanical systems out. Of course, we'll take care of cooling and heating. So we'll work with our team to talk through that and be able to present that to you. We're lucky right now, and I'm not saying that this is what you've asked us to do, but photovoltaics, which really does help from a resilience standpoint, really, from an emergency standpoint, the cost of all that is coming down tremendously. It's now at $3 a watt, and just for reference, 10 years ago it was $10 a watt. And all that just means is it's really cost effective. And years ago it was hard to make it pencil out. Over 20 years, it was really a tough sell. So we'll bring that together, and we hope to bring that, we'll bring that together in our presentation to you. We'll bring other folks to present the detail of that, so that you can have a story, but you can also have it supported by how it is within the budget dollars you have.
And for instance, PV is so modular that we can design for it and list it as an option. And you can always put in the infrastructure, like the conduit to the roof, and then add the PV later.
So what kinds of opportunities or limitations does this site have for the PVs because of all the trees and things like that?
We'll look at solar potential. So there's mapping we'll map it in terms of shading, which we've done with Sherwood before. We'll map it in terms of what is received on site. I think we have to avoid as much as we can the tree canopies, just to save the trees. So we'll look at what that means, and because it's about a site, a campus, and many buildings, we may look at it as a net zero campus versus net zeroing out each piece.
Right.
So the PVs on the 2-story don't really only support the police facility, but overall you can. So I think that's how we've been looking at it with the team, even in our interview. Music.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
That's
it
great.
does. It does. And the program, we'll just have to work through all the storage requirements, the generator, and all of that, and tell you how much that looks like we'll need. The best thing for us is just to make the buildings work hard. So if the buildings work really hard, and you'll want them to, then whatever we add on to supplement gets reduced. So it's a 1 and 2-story buildings have the greatest opportunity to really think.
I like the idea of breaking it down like this because it gives you more leverage.
More flexibility. Yeah. Yes.
And Rick seems to like the 2-story. I'd really like to see, I know you're working on, I'd like to see I'd like to see both. I'd like to see choice.
Yeah.
Although 1 and 2?
Yes, and because of the savings in the police facility and the other buildings that don't have to be built to that standard, I think we really need to. I'd like to see the campus with that choice.
Separate out the police from the others. I really agree with that.
Yeah.
Whether the police is 1 or 2-story. I mean, you're saying let's see both, but we want to separate the others from the police. I think that makes lots
No
of
matter
sense
what.
for cost management and for maximizing light and ventilation.
There are always issues about elevators and
Elevators,
how
right,
many elevators and
right.
everything. So let's see choices, please.
Okay, train station location, does anybody have a strong feeling about that?
No what?
Train station location.
It ain't moving.
That's a strong statement.
Direction, it's always.
And you know what, there are
Don't mince words, Phil.
people in town who like the old train station facility.
Where it is.
There's somebody every year that comes and puts wreaths on that bloody building in the holidays.
Oh,
It's a
really?
beautiful building.
Yes.
But they're not proposing changing the building, they're just proposing moving it to the
To the
center
center.
rather than have it at the corner.
Who has the right to
I've
that?
been on the rail committee as long as it's been there, and Caltrain has absolutely been terrible about anything to do with that station, the holdout station, rebuilding the platform, the whole works.
And they're not feeling exactly warmly toward us.
Because we're suing
They
them.
don't like it.
So I think we have.
Well, you know.
Touch that.
Yeah,
Clean
I
up
think,
goes back, is that the
Yeah.
saying?
I mean, that's,
It is
it's
where
not,
it is.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that as part of the EIR process, and I'll get up again, thanks, Evan. This year, we've asked the traffic engineer for the environmental assessment to look, because
Yeah,
this site
it's horrible.
has,
Mhm.
it has no utility.
Right.
And so I've said, what, would it be safer? Because that's, we're looking at safety, accessibility,
Right,
they're gonna look at, attractiveness and all that, and I'm an engineer. So, does it make sense, to do something like that so that it lines up here? Now, it may mean losing a heritage tree and having to replant a new tree, but I looked at that and the tree has actually got some significant health problems.
There are health
But
issues
anyway,
in that tree.
But he's an engineer, not an arborist.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, George. But the idea is there any advantage in being able to use this part of the site now and lining up with the road here so that it's safer? Because right now,
It's
people
horrible.
are really close to the railroad tracks, and we've all seen in the last 9 months what happens, unfortunately, when people get too close to the railroad tracks.
Well,
So, I just wanted to let you know that's another moving piece,
There was-
and we'll have answers, in 6 to 8 weeks.
That is a
some
dead space
discussion
there right
about
now.
having space there so that when we get back service,
Mhm.
and the schools start busing their children again here, that there's places for school buses, a bus to come and pick up kids, turn around. So we need to think about that, and that is a safety issue.
Sure, and, as I think you're all aware, that dash line that's shown there that's railroad property versus
Right.
our property, so we have to keep, we cannot cut off access to the railroad
No.
property. So they're,
You know,
but,
fence.
right, tall, no, anyway, so they're recognizing that.
I was just wondering that, I know it's a contentious issue in Atherton, but there's some, bullet train may come through one day and that site may need to be grade separated, so whatever we plan 20, 30 years from now, it's gonna have to take into account any grade separation.
Yeah, we are going,
Yeah.
we're going to meet with,
Underground.
we're gonna meet with with the San Mateo County, with Samtrans, who's, part of the planning for the Joint Powers Board, as well as High Speed Rail, to see, what kind of changes do they envision over the next, 30 to 60 years in terms of the life of this building. We're hoping that it's not gonna have any adverse impact, you may be right. Right now, we've got the quad gates here, we don't have them at Wilkins, and, so we're gonna have to look at those kinds of things. Thank you.
We only just proposed relocating the station, not for any functional ideas. It was more just about tying it into
Putting it in the
something,
center.
putting it in the center. That was the only reason. So
Okay.
we're fine with where it is right now.
Yes,
So,
it's,
And the EIR.
no chance.
We just-
Don't waste any time on
Right,
that.
the
Yeah.
EIR did not contemplate moving it, and if we wanted to move it, we'd have to do an addendum to the.
I didn't put this on the list.
No,
That's good to get.
this is not, as I mentioned, this is not an exhaustive list.
Okay, no, it isn't,
Things
it'll,
like,
it'll keep rolling.
one story versus two story police
Yeah.
is not on here, but they're
Right.
absolutely right to ask for the committee's input.
Right.
And, the chief will, I'm sure, have some input as well.
Yeah, I am just concerned with the critical path issues
Yeah.
that you need at this point in time, and I think that the water lines tied in with the underground garage, you know, it's critical. So 30 more days and we'll find out more information. Gordon, you know, Steve in his absence, you know, sent out an exhaustive email about his brothers on this. And some of it's really going beyond what we're talking about today. I promised him that I would convey his thoughts to the committee, but I don't think we're there yet on some of these things. I want to be able to tell him that I did something with his email.
Rose, if I may suggest, why don't you make sure, scan that and make sure that anything that's at, at this higher level, we bring up now.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there anything in there?
Well, you know, just sort of the orientation of the library and town hall, and I think you got the email, but I think the rest of the CCAC hasn't, and you know, it just sort of goes into the overall master planning, which is the purpose of this. So it's, you know, the town hall library, that they sort of create a plaza and, you know, all these good feeling spaces, the police admin planning, you know, somehow the sound is buffered from the rail, which you've already done. And creating a core, you know, inside beyond the building rather than towards the rail, which is what I agree with too. Creating more soft spaces rather than hardscape spaces, and I think that would be great for the community here.
I think he was he was reacting to when SWA came in as part of your team to present a number of the examples they gave of some of their public were hardscape and. This is Atherton. You know,
Yeah, we need gardens.
Right.
Gardens and grass once we have water.
Yeah, and
or at least green.
At least green.
You know, and he talks about the grade separations, and I don't think we have any control over that yet, and improving the crossings, which I don't think we have, you know, the train crossings, which I don't think it's in our, you know, scope of work here, but I think it's a, you know, good thought. Just to consider that there may be a grade separation. Library in the park, you know, supporting a park, but don't know where the park is in the library, you know. He's not really tied into the park where it is now with the library. So, you know, and he's thinking about going to a cluster of buildings rather than the single building. So, you know, you have this already, but I promised that I would convey this to the rest of the CCAC.
Sounds like what we're all saying.
And I think a lot of it's going, I told him that I think a lot of this will be discussion beyond this meeting, that he will be here to, you know, represent himself better. So, so that's it.
You did it.
So you can say I did it.
You did it.
You know, to piggyback on that, when we had the outreach meetings for the master plan, a couple of the recurring themes, and Rose just mentioned, were, you know, reducing the hardscape, softer spaces, if not reducing the hardscape, at least reassigning it so you have a softer feel and it's not just one big parking lot. And then the other thing that always came up was accessibility for town services. So people really like the fact that they can just park out here, run in, take care of their postal stuff, or talk to somebody in the town office or whatever, and then zip right out. So being able to make it accessible from the nearby parking was really something that people stressed, as well as, you know, keeping the rural character and creating the open spaces.
So are we not, you know, are we eliminating the option of continuing this road anymore? I mean, just closing, you know, the Ashfield, is that out of the picture completely now? Just closing Ashfield?
Wait, closing it off is out of the picture?
No, opening it up rather, keeping it open. Is that out of the picture?
I hope not.
Okay, I just meant.
Everybody wants it to go
Okay.
accessible,
Right.
but not through.
Okay.
And the EIR commented about the only thing I thought was weird in the EIR is they said that because you added one more trip, or two more trips, I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was like you had to have a no left turn out of Maple onto El Camino Real, and I said, you know, who in the right mind would try and no left turn out of Maple going onto El Camino Real.
Oh, to head southbound?
Why? Because you were.
No, why is that different from now?
It isn't really. I mean, there's no sign currently.
No, but right now you can turn left from Maple onto El Camino
Yes,
Real.
He's saying he wants to
they
turn
recommended as part of the mitigation measures because of adding the trips that a sign go up saying no left.
Because of adding the trips.
We're adding trips. The library being larger. They have the analysis suggests there will be more
people using it.
Exactly.
I see, so there'll be more people using the surface
And the,
roads.
right, and the level
So
of
there'll be more
service,
people using Maple than currently use it,
and therefore they
and
would,
therefore more danger in people turning left onto ECR from Maple.
right, and therefore, and mitigating, so that's gonna come down.
That makes
So,
And Ashfield, nothing on Ashfield?
Yeah.
no, because Ashfield
Ashfield,
Doesn't
you
go to
could,
the library.
it has a.
Oh, I
Doesn't go
see.
to the library.
I can tell you could die just as easily turning left from Ashfield.
Yeah.
It's true.
That's the truth, yeah.
Well, I'm guessing the entrance to the police department will be different, so you're not
Right.
gonna have the traffic on it.
No, that's true. That would be nice.
I'm just,
But, you know, what I'm hearing everyone saying is they like the configuration of Ashfield
Well,
coming directly to
Right.
Fair Oaks,
As opposed to
and
having.
the,
Right.
and the,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
Station Lane,
Absolutely.
you know, depending on the water line or whatever, Station Lane essentially parallel in the railroad, and the one change I was asking them to look at was what could happen at Lloyden. Could that intersection be made safer, and better designated, and a better entry statement to the town? Because you may remember the master plan has station kind of coming through here.
Right, exactly.
And which also creates an extra, 24 feet by, let's say 200 feet of asphalt, which,
Who needs that?
well, but they have to allow the people to circulate.
Oh.
So they either have to get out to Fair Oaks or they have to get to Ashfield to Fair Oaks.
Oh,
We're not gonna cul-de-sac it, that's why.
I see.
Okay.
Adam, did you want to say?
Well, I was just gonna piggyback onto that, because it's a great point, because it talks about access to the site. I'm just wondering, reading through the master plan, there was a lot of conversation about gateway and front door. Where's the front of your civic center,
Mhm.
you know? And there was some wonderful diagramming that was done, pulling information from the community on the different gateways. But on a scheme like this, where things start to kind of spin around a bit, we're starting to think about, acoustics now, and then creating good outdoor spaces. I'm just curious what the table thinks in terms of where the front of this civic center is.
I
Where
don't
is
know
it
if we
really?
have one.
Maybe there is no front.
Can the front be from the internal part? Can it be accessible from the heart of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining if
If
you're.
you look at parking, there's parking here, here, and here, which
Right.
kind of makes this coming in this
Right.
way to be the front, which is what you just
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
So maybe this really starts to set up then your front
That's
door,
right.
and it's about
Mhm.
that, right? It's
Mhm.
about kind of coming off of that.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
really, it's
Space.
not a suburban approach, which is really a street and a front.
No, it's a
It's
pedestrian
much
front
more
door.
pedestrian
Right.
front, it's
Mhm.
much more oriented that way, where
I think
Is
that's
that-
cool.
that tells us a lot about how the buildings then start to touch the
Mhm.
ground and how they connect to one another in the
Mhm.
pathways.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a brief discussion about Ashfield, but it would just cause too much traffic, and
Cause
it's
too
just,
much
it's not realistic.
Yeah.
That was, real brief.
Mhm.
Okay.
But, this master plan that we came up with, again, this is a good transfer of unused landscape or softscaping into hardscape. So you're just kind of transferring some used space, utilizing it now as hardscape, and then transferring the soft space over to the open spaces. So, that plan for Asheville really worked really well. Now, I use this intersection quite a bit, and the problem is when you're coming out of Lloyden Park, you can see here, but you have your blind here. And when you're coming out of Station Lane, you can see here
But you can't
for
see
both
it.
cars and pedestrians.
Mhm.
And then you have traffic, oftentimes just, if there's not a train
Flying
coming,
through.
just speeds over the
train tracks.
train tracks.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's an odd shaped roundabout that can be used, I'm not sure. Obviously, we don't have a lot of room to kind of have straight lines, so it's very problematic and very
Actually,
dangerous.
let me answer this. Who owns, but I don't.
Who owns the corner property?
Yeah.
This property here,
Whatever the flowers are in there. No, the one
or
right.
this right
Yeah,
here.
that's us, isn't
We
it?
own it.
We own it, the
Yeah.
town does.
So that's
Yeah.
some space we can utilize to
That's what
try
he
to
just
soften
said.
it.
That's
Mhm.
what
Gordon was saying
This
make
is
it a street
absolutely
then.
the town space.
We planted that. I remember Kathy out there dealing with planting stuff, so I'm thinking, maybe there's a way to make some of that work better.
Well, that's what Gordon was saying,
Right,
make it a
and
road.
That's what
We're
Gordon
gonna
was
have a
saying.
traffic engineer
That's
look at that.
exactly right.
Right.
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at this looking, so the parking's up here. It would sure be nice if this just came through like
Mhm.
this and the parking could be here,
Mhm.
but it's not, so.
That was defined when it was.
Can we buy this property? But it's something that, as long as we're doing this entire project, this needs to be addressed.
Yeah,
Right.
Good point.
Yeah,
I do like the idea of having the entrance from the heart of it, the middle of it.
Mhm.
I really like that.
But it does mean you park around it,
I
and you
know.
walk into
I
it.
know.
Right there, but dealing
Well,
with
this little
accessibility.
parking piece is a little bit odd, it's all
Right.
on the side, but
You've got 2 two of them on the side. if
There,
for some reason.
there's
But
opportunity.
there,
for
but
parking
we
here.
have those kinds of things sort of now.
Right, where you can imagine, you know, people
And
coming.
we
using
definitely have
parking.
that one down there
Right,
now.
exactly.
That's probably where it
And,
is.
and I would
Yeah.
guess that the most important entrance
Mhm.
is to the post office.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Because that's where people wanna,
Well, and to the permit office, a lot of people go into the permit office.
Yeah, that's true.
they spend a little more time there. The post office can be an in and out.
In and out.
And now.
Mhm.
Or the permit office and the post office would be in the same location.
The same, the same.
Mhm.
there.
Good for
There
you.
you go. How about that instead of a trailer?
Much better.
So this configuration, if this is the post office and the permit office, there's not exactly as adjacent parking as there is today.
You can't pull it.
And this, I assume you're going underneath.
That was a thought. The idea was initially to pull the police parking off of the revised Asheville. That was the initial idea. But if the police starts to migrate here,
Mhm.
and depending on what's better for them in terms of access out and in, Station Lane might be a better place for them to have access to.
Yeah,
because it
there
might
was,
connect
they were
better.
coming in over
That's
here, and there were even just 3 parking places here that people could
Mhm.
Quick
get
to
into the
in and out.
post office that would.
If there was an idea, you
Right.
could do something very close
Exactly.
to that to get in, and then if it would benefit the police department to
Yeah.
have some kind of access, you know, off of this area here. And that's gonna be the conversation about an idea like this, is to dive into deeper and deeper. But I think the key thing we're hearing very loud and very clear, is that the idea of your civic space being protected by the buildings,
Yeah.
Mhm.
that this is seen
Facing.
as, it's not an awful thing, but it's maybe not the
It's
thing we
got-
wanna
it's
focus on.
It's pretty
It's
awful.
big.
It's
It's a
We
nuisance.
know life, don't like it.
It's maybe not the thing we wanna focus on, and that there's much more, Atherton identity in this part of the site to kind of relate to than this part of the site,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Access to the police station is critical. If we're gonna go with an underground, that's something we'll definitely study here. Quick accessibility to the things that people use on a daily basis, like the post office and the permitting office. We wanna make sure that you have those things.
And safety,
Okay.
also, I have walked my dog for 16 years up and down this very track,
Yeah.
twice a day, and tons of moms with babies come for all those programs, and
Mhm.
little kids,
Tons.
toddlers, and, you know,
But
dogs
the-
and everything.
But the mom's parking over here to walk across the green to the
Yeah,
library is not at all a problem.
Well, I was just wondering about, the only thing I was gonna say is they're gonna worry about safety just crossing there. There's some way there was a
Well,
clear,
they have other parking on the back side of the site.
oh, that's
Yeah,
true
there-
too.
where there is
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
That's true too.
Yeah, that's
Well,
there.
Also,
Yeah,
Adam, let me make sure you heard that,
but I don't think the traffic's coming through that fast.
even though I
from
didn't
Asheville.
look at
I'm not
underground
saying-
It'd be
parking,
a safety issue.
that the,
No, you're right, it's
the
not speeding,
trade-off,
but
if
there just
there's
needs to be
significant additional
delineation.
cost for underground versus that much, that
Oh, I
many
know.
more spaces on the surface, there may not be strong support, there may not be
Right.
financial support
For that.
for that trade-off. It may be, okay, a little bit less open
That's
green,
that's the entrance to.
because
That'll
you
be
have,
the-
you have
that'll be
surface
the
parking,
conversation.
right, I just wanna make sure you.
So we can look
Yeah.
at a scheme that starts to do what we're all starting to participate in, which is this idea of this green and entrances off of it, buildings used to block
That's interesting.
view and noise from the train station, from the train. And then we'll look at a surface parking opportunity. We'll also look at it below grade, because there will be trade-offs.
Right.
There will definitely be trade-offs, but we won't know what those are until we actually draw through that.
Mhm.
Just like the library conversation here and the water line conversation, which this is where we're really gonna sort of pressure more than anywhere else. in the city.
One question that came up earlier, and I wanna make sure, getting the
Mhm.
committee's input. If, because let's say the water line doesn't move, or maybe it does, I don't know, I'm not sure, but is there a concern if the library were demolished and out of service for 18 months? And this also goes to Tom, because we raised it earlier, there's staffing issues also, although you don't have like hundreds of people working at our library. But, so maybe the committee and Tom could provide some input as to the benefits and drawbacks of either having, a temporary library, temporarily relocating part of it, whatever, or having nothing for 18 months. So that's both the committee and Tom to give us some input.
Well, of course, we could do either. The preference for us is to have a temporary library, but we can operate a temporary library out of, such things as like a construction trailer. So it doesn't have to be anything special, but I think to serve the community, it's always best to have some sort of temporary service, and we can staff that. It doesn't have to be on site either. I think
Could it be
There
a little
might
bit
something
longer,
wrong, yeah, there might be something in the park.
temporarily, without raising too many feathers?
Well, also, we're no doubt gonna work on this parcel in some pieces. And the library right now goes down in here.
That's right.
And, you know, if you wrap around here, you're gonna impact it, but in fact, it may, you know, we'll have to see exactly what the design is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the coming into it, the concept is that unless we're gonna build on what the library site is, there's no reason not to leave the library. You won't have access to the library from this side, because this side's gonna
Right.
be worked on, but coming from Maple and Station Lane, there would be access to the library, and unless we're going to build on any portion of that site, we just leave it the way it is. And do that piece of the parcel after we finish this piece of the parcel.
The proposed master plan actually left all of the existing buildings functional during the construction.
Well, all
Is
the
that
library,
reasonable
buildings,
anymore?
But it also left,
not all the administration.
it did with no underground parking.
That was a criteria that they
Yes.
had to follow.
So, you know,
I thought it took your office out.
Well, only if we did underground parking would it encroach into the administration buildings.
The permitting center's gone.
Yeah.
But all new construction would be north of the current administration building, police department. Right.
In the email, there is mention of the library garden not being loved. Is there something that we should know about that?
No.
Or is that a detail to not worry about?
That's the, you know,
Okay,
that,
okay.
It's a junk heap back there.
yeah.
What's that?
The library garden that exists right
there's a
now.
tall
Oh, back
hedge
here?
of trees.
Yeah.
It makes it kind of shady.
Yep.
And
Oh,
I
I
think
see.
that's the issue, and the hedge needs to stay.
Mhm.
People like that hedge, it's
a redwood tree hedge.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you about
Reading
the
park.
garden
No,
right
he's talking
behind
about
the
Reading Park.
It's creating
Oh.
waste.
So, I think that's the
No,
issue.
he's
Yeah.
It's way down, it's
Okay.
right,
Oh,
it's
he's
right
talking
here.
about that.
It's not
This is
used
what
a
is
lot,
being
and
talked
just
about is
don't
right here.
keep it sacred
These are
if
redwood
it
trees and it
interferes
creates
with
a
your
little
plans.
park
The
right
redwoods.
here.
Yeah.
Reading circle, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a little
right.
reading circle there,
Right.
and none of it
It's
gets
not
used,
I mean, there are babies sitting on the grass and moms on the grass and dogs on the grass, but,
but it's dark
yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the redwood
Shade.
tree.
Right.
Got it.
Because of west.
And cool.
Yes, it is
That's
nice
right.
and cool, actually.
So it's,
So it doesn't get used very
But
much.
the whole area is gonna be much more attractive, so
Yeah.
chances are that will also be more attractive when there's more people there.
have to be creative in how to activate that area or reactivate that area.
Okay.
Now, this building and the current library building, as they're situated now, do not meet current town's setbacks, you know that.
We were just talking about setbacks and parcels, yeah.
Okay, so be careful.
Because there's many parcels within this
There's
site. Yeah.
six parcels on this property.
So is it, okay, must be.
That's gonna be a,
This building's too close to the neighbor.
yeah, that's gonna be a conversation that'll come through the plan. The setback issue will come up in several
Yes.
designs, and they'll need to matriculate up, and there might be, you know, something that goes to the planning commission, city council, to do a lot merger or whatever, but to address the setback issue head on.
Problems there.
Yeah, it's identified.
Yeah, I think we're assuming there's a 60-foot setback,
Right.
which it's not, yeah, it looks like it's
It's not there.
not
Well,
yet.
depending on whether this,
Whoa.
this,
Not-
this line is side or front,
Yeah.
That's
Right.
exactly
could be
right.
50 feet as well.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Okay.
So will you be here next month with something for us to see? What's the plan?
Well, we can go as fast as you all can go.
Next week we'll be here.
I think what we found, we'll wanna do is dive into the library more, dive into the police facility with folks. Do be a little more educated about that part of it. Hopefully get a little bit of feedback. If not, we will use our 15 or 20 feet from centerline assumptions on the water line. And find the next time, which I think we could, in a month, come back with some next steps. What I heard is what Adam was repeating, above and below grade parking, still looking at that as options, 1 and 2 story, definitely separating the police facility EOC from the other
But you said
program.
they could be attached, those separate,
Like
Right.
attached.
Right,
They could
just
be
to,
Connected.
Connected.
But
I like
not
that.
necessarily
Yeah.
joined or public.
I mean, I think
access.
one of the programming things where there was kind of double duty, as I recall, was that the staff, lunchroom was the same, so, there's not a separate one for police and a separate one for administration and
right,
a separate one for community development. And I think even the restrooms, so that core
right.
It's a public zone.
served everybody.
And we wanna do that as much as we
Well, we should
possibly
do it.
can.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll probably come back with some of the programs squeezed down, which may not make everyone happy, but only when you do that will you kind of understand your edges.
Yeah, that's
Cause
fine.
you can also, this is the time to
We
be
did that in the master planning process.
already, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're used to that. No, we know you're gonna wanna find out what we don't like as well as what we do like.
That's right, exactly. If there's anything in here that you really like that isn't reflected, just let us know too, because we know we're gonna eventually go back to folks who've seen this, and if there's anything that's important, even if it's a shape or a curve, we'll want to not forget that, because they'll want to believe that this is a continuation of what you've all talked about, so. And if you don't think about it now and it comes up later, that's great, but just, we know it's important not to.
Ignore that.
Right.
And then any communication goes through Paul and Gordon from our group, so.
So can I ask if, you all have talked about being helpful with fundraising. And we already have very
Quite a few.
creative ways to think that we like to develop.
He brought his checkbook, so.
Okay.
No,
not your body.
No, but I'm just, is
Bodies
it
and
Gordon,
parties.
we wanna ask you for if certain dates and times not work, how do we coordinate that?
Yeah, please go through me.
Yeah.
You too?
And by the way, we have the schedule here, because one of the things, and we don't have to decide it now, but I thought the sooner you think about it, the better. Because we took longer than we had previously anticipated to engage and review and select the architects, we are behind our previous schedule. So I think the neighborhood meetings, the roadshow we talked about, the public meetings I think are in June.
Right.
But some of the neighborhood meetings go over into, after the 4th of July.
That's
Is
gonna be a
anybody
problem.
here?
And
Yeah,
I knew it was,
nobody's
so
here.
I don't want,
Yeah.
I didn't want to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
So, if we have to not condense those, but, they obviously can't be two places at once. But if we have to make them, more condensed, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of thing, we can do that. So, you don't have to give an answer now, but I wanted to introduce it so it wasn't a shock next month of, oh, good heavens, so,
I think it's important that we decide those dates sooner rather than later.
I think George is correct.
Gordon,
So,
can we go through the schedule?
absolutely.
Okay,
That's
let's-
why I
let's
brought it
go
up.
through- Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have a lot of questions too, and that goes to what are we doing next and what are you doing next?
And what's important for
So,
us.
so anyway, 4A, I think we've talked about, the items listed here, and maybe, hopefully you've got enough information from us that, won't hold you back.
The one thing, if I may, Rose, that we didn't talk about specifically, nor did you have to decide when, but the check-in process and schedule with council. As George said, I'll be giving him staff reports, he can send stuff out to council, but if council, if there are formal decisions the council has to make, and I see them as making those by phase, so when they finish their master planning and it's conceptual, we'll take that to council and,
Okay.
so we're gonna have to coordinate that, which also means, just like you, I know you've done it before, Steve has done it before, a member of the CCAC being able to attend the council meeting
Okay.
in case there are any questions. So while they'll ask George, what about such and such, I think
How
certainly
would-
the mayor, I think you prefer having somebody from the CCAC also to be able to say, yes, we've looked at it and we're thrilled with
Yeah,
it.
but it depends on if it's just a check-in, then our methodology is to check in through the one-on-ones that we have with George, and they work extremely well. So I don't wanna over-formalize that process. If there's a change to the master plan that's a real change, then I think that's a different level. but I haven't heard anything in this discussion that I would say rises. I think the biggest thing we've talked about is separating the single building and administration from more than one, and I think that people are signed up to that. That's been discussed. So,
And there is
that's my opinion.
there is, there may be, I guess in several of their schemes, there is a change in the orientation and connection between Station Lane and Fairlands. It's not huge though.
True. We're retaining the current connection rather than bringing these two roads together behind an administration building.
That's not a significant.
But I don't think that's I mean, both of those issues are important issues, and I'd say they're the most significant changes here. But I think they're absolutely the kind of thing that gets checked out through this one-on-one process. And if anybody has a problem, that person will articulate it to George, and then it'll come before the group.
Great. Okay.
I see a major change as you're gonna bring Ashfield all the way through, instead of creating the center.
That would be a big change.
Big change, or you're gonna do a 12,000 square foot library and a 50,000 square foot town hall.
Yeah. Okay.
Big
Right.
changes.
Huge change.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'm representing
Right.
the committee's input appropriately to City Council. So,
Oh, that's a
thank you.
good point, because I had a question about that coming into this meeting too. What items, qualify, have to go to council, and that could really set the schedule back, and, that. So I think that's been answered. Thank you.
So you might want to go over the public meetings and the neighborhood meetings
Right.
when they're scheduled. To make
No,
sure.
that's exactly, I've
Good.
gotten question marks on that, so let's proceed with this.
Before
Ad
you-
hoc,
Before you leave the schedule.
we're not leaving it, we're gonna go to it, we haven't even touched on the schedule.
Pardon me?
We haven't even started the schedule yet.
I have a different idea about the schedule.
Okay, no, we'll get to it, I just wanna quickly go through this agenda and then we'll get to the schedule, okay? Hold on, okay. Ad hoc committee reports, anybody from the library? No. Outreach? No. Budget? No. See, Phil, we're gonna get there really quick. Project management? No. Green building? No. I think we've talked about that. Okay, now project schedule. Okay, I told you.
That was easy.
Okay, now right back again.
Okay. Phil?
We all had copies of the schedule at one point. I don't remember mine went, but it's gone someplace. And it might be good, there's a wall over in the permit center, outside the wall, or inside the wall, it's a big solid wall. Suppose you put a full-scale schedule up there and update it every Monday morning, it'll work. But somebody would go over there, anybody, from outside town center, if anybody wanted to go take a look, where are we on the schedule? And somebody asks you, say, go over and look at the town, there's the whole schedule all the way through to when we move in.
Would it be better in the entrance by the post office?
Somewhat.
How about
I agree.
online?
I think it would be better in the entrance by the post office, but I think it's a good suggestion
Yeah.
for anybody in the town to be able to see, but
Absolutely.
I think more people are going into the post office, so,
I was just thinking of a big wall.
yeah.
Wherever a wall is, it'll work.
Uh-huh.
Considering all the walls are gonna be demolished eventually, it doesn't make any difference how we mess them up.
It is online every month, by the way.
Online, yeah, it is online.
It's online, but still, I think that's.
Okay,
Yeah.
he wants it on the wall.
Gordon, did you have to make a motion on
I
this
agree with
stuff
that.
before yet?
I
Okay,
think so.
good.
If I can suggest, at least updating it monthly. You said weekly. 'cause
Monthly
It's
is-
not going to change much weekly, but monthly it would.
Update.
Update.
And you're saying update and post, and I'm certainly that's something we
Okay.
can do.
Right.
No motion on that?
Find a good public place to
Oh.
hang it up.
Will you find which wall you think is the best, Gordon?
Well, I'll tell you right now, by the post office, I have the master plan up there in draft, and so
It can come down.
I can, as we get new drawings from them, I'll replace the HMC drawing and say, latest news, and it'll have the
That's
drawing
great.
and the schedule. How's that?
That's great.
And
Good.
Teresa can probably post it online.
Mhm.
It's online.
Yeah,
It's online.
Yeah, I work with her to do
But I
that.
can post it, it's a great PR vehicle for transparency and all, I mean, it's out there. It's
Right.
really a good idea, Phil.
Okay.
Okay, so schedule, we're in the, we've done all the stuff already, we're in the master plan review and programming for the next month, and I wanted to go through some of the activity and confirm activity and talk to Gordon and Paul and WRNS. You're going, it appears that you're going through the programming preparation for the next month and meeting with people. You have one item, 38, line item 38, public meeting CCAC user groups. one day. Is that a separate meeting that we need to schedule in, that we haven't scheduled yet?
Can I qualify a little bit
sure.
what's here? This is our interpretation of the schedule between Gordon and myself.
Oh,
And part of our meeting before the CCAC meeting was to determine how the design team can overlay some of their milestones on top of the schedule. And we'll reformat this with a little bit more refinement about what day of the week, what day of the month those meetings are. What I try to do is in red say these are public outreach meetings so that we could all sort of flag those and determine what date would be appropriate. So this is still a work in progress.
okay.
But I would say also that while, you know, we will certainly want to get their input because they have to do the work. They said they can move as fast as we want.
Right.
This is where especially the outreach committee, but the whole CCAC
Okay.
should provide input onto those days and dates and times, because it's gonna be your role really to get out there in the community and you know, bang the drum and get people to come.
So it's really line 48 and 50 that we need to, that we really need to solidify.
Okay.
Yeah, line 50 is neighborhood roadshow,
So
and
we need
it's
to find
scheduled the
time,
last week of
dates,
June.
and then we gotta find places to have.
Tough time.
That's what we were
Okay,
saying.
how
it's
many of
tough
them are we
times.
having?
So I was gonna suggest that if we think, it needs to move up a little bit because we're hitting, right, you know, school's ending and vacations are starting. Then we can work with Paul and Gordon to find better dates. What we'll need, before any roadshow is to make sure we have the right narrative with you.
Right.
How sustainable is it? Is it 1 or 2 stories? Where does parking go?
Right.
And what Adam had presented in the interviews were very sort of simple diagrammatic models. They didn't really talk a lot about the architecture or the materials, but really about planning.
I think that's okay.
So that could be part of what we move towards, knowing that embedded in that also is, this is about the kind of program size we're looking at, this is how they're organized. But it's important for us to get the story, the narrative clear with you all before we hit anything. Or else someone's gonna say, like they always do, so is it platinum? No.
I didn't say that.
Do I have a library room where I can read? I mean, there'll be a lot of that, so
Yeah.
we could
I think
work
those
with
things
you
are
all.
important to know.
We could work with you all
But
to
the specific design, the specific architectures, I don't think is necessary at this stage.
That helps
I mean,
cut off a lot of.
Yeah.
I really think you could hold that off, do that during the summertime and prepare that for the fall.
Yeah, we'll have to work with,
Have a second neighborhood road
Yes.
show.
yeah, well,
It's almost a finished product, you know, refinement level finished product versus conceptual level product.
we will probably wanna talk with you all about some of that, at least within this room, because cost becomes a part of everything,
Of
right?
course.
So whether it's sheathed in wood or plaster or zinc or whatever it is gonna be a cost thing that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah,
So we
we'll
can
know
talk about it
a lot
when
more
we'll
about
show
what is, you know, available by then, because we should be way deeper into the fundraising.
Does that work, Paul and Gordon?
We can, but to Dee Dee's point, I think that to give the public enough notification of when these dates are gonna happen, we need to start setting some goals, like if the conceptual design should be done before the 4th of July, then let's set that as a milestone and then work back from that. And then moving forward, if we need to put a notification out, you've gotta get something printed, it's either gotta be posted on the website or mailed out to the neighborhoods.
Paul's right, we got a lot of planning ahead of it, and
Yeah.
the preparation is.
You know, and to get ready for that meeting, knowing that if we're gonna produce some large boards out of this stuff, it's gonna take these guys
Right.
a little time to not just do the design work, but get it all printed up and ready.
So you're talking about the concept alternatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be line
And
48.
throw into that, if you're thinking of end of May or June, we have so many other conflicts in people's lives that we really need to give them as much time as we can with the dates.
So,
And May's filling up with the neighborhood, the individual fundraising parties already, you know, key dates are starting to fill up for fundraising events. We have 2 or 3. 2 or 3 is 3 weekends. You
so
know.
are we gonna hold on to those dates then for 48 and 50 for, June 9th and 10th? And then the public meetings at the end of June? I'm just, because by my calendar, we have 2 more meetings before then, which would be Monday, May 4th, and I think Monday, June 1st, would that be right?
Right.
So, I mean, back timing from that, are those two meetings sufficient to be ready for concept alternatives on June 9th and 10th, and then the roadshow at the end of June? I guess, to me, that's the question.
I think it seems too soon for the roadshow, isn't it? No?
Well, I don't know, in terms of the dates, I'd push them up by a week, because a roadshow from June 25th to July 1st,
Nobody's
It's gonna be
here.
tough.
that's
Nobody's
gonna
here.
be a really hard thing to get
I
people
want
to.
to be here.
I know, even a week before, there's a small period between when kids get out of school and when people take off. And we might be able to capture that if we did that a week before.
Right, so that'd
I
be
think
June 18th.
If you come after that week.
Yeah, that's graduation.
So then how much notice do we need to, a month?
Yeah, at least a month.
So then we'd have to have everything organized at the next meeting to have that out by May 18th.
Well, we just need to pick the date, we
dates.
don't need the details yet.
Right.
Right.
So that they can still be working on it, as long as we have what the meeting's gonna be about, where it's gonna be. and
Right,
We
exactly.
have to know when the
Well,
meeting's
that's kinda
gonna
what I'm
be
talking
at
about,
the
yeah.
next CCAC meeting.
Yeah. Cause if these are
So
neighborhood
really gotta nail it
roadshows,
down,
we're picking
May 4th.
homes and people.
Yeah, really nail it down.
We have to lock in the dates on May 4th.
That's
That's
right.
Yeah, and
We really gotta do this
looking
right.
at the calendar, I think from June 29th on, forget it. Because that's, people are gonna go start July 4th that week.
We gotta find out when the local schools start back in again. They start a lot earlier.
Middle of
August
Say that.
15th,
Middle of
yeah.
August.
What's
August
that?
18th.
School resumes.
Oh, I got you.
Schools resume.
Back again.
A third week of August.
Yeah.
Second week, some of them, but third week.
So you're scheduling these meetings, roadshows, at least the last week of June,
Well, before the last week in June.
before June
Maybe
29th.
the third week of June.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe the third week of June.
So you'd be looking at the 18th or the 25th, that week in there.
Is forget it.
So write down some dates and then send them to
Send
board
them to
meeting,
Yeah.
and then
Or interval.
to the defense of our design team, they need the time to produce this
Right.
for those dates, and we can back those dates up a little bit and make sure that
What
we can
dates
all
do you
pull
want
off.
to send you?
Pardon?
Somebody pick the dates, and it just,
We have to find someone willing to do these
Right.
homes, right?
Well,
And how
let's-
many are we talking
we have two
about?
things. The public meeting, that's open to anybody.
Mhm.
You know, people will come and talk and say, oh, I like this, like that. Thereafter, you'll take that input, make some changes to drawing, oh, what we heard was this, and it's that, and turn that, and then prepare it, and then we're going out into the community. So if that
There's 2
meeting,
weeks.
right, this
Right, in between.
this had 2 weeks in between that. If you shorten that to 1 week,
Mhm.
and that's whether you can, assuming you can do that, then you can start, going out to the community as early as, the 18th. Then you have from the 18th through about
I'm looking at the weeks, so it's the week of the 15th to the
Well,
19th.
but it's the 15th, if you want them to present anything to recognize changes that you receive from
From
the
the-
public meeting, they have to have a couple of days
But
to.
if you had the
redo
public
drawings.
meeting in the first week of June.
Right, then we may have to move that up, exactly right.
That's the point. If the public meeting occurs between June 1st and June 5th,
We meet on the 1st.
Right.
you meet on the 1st, so if you had it on the 4th or the 5th,
Yeah. Or the 3rd or 4th.
third
The
is
third is
Wednesday,
council
we have a
meeting.
study
Oh, sorry.
session on
Okay.
Wednesday.
Okay.
so that would be the unveiling of ideas.
The public meeting.
And we do
We
this
have
once or
Tuesday.
twice.
I don't know.
I think the plan
I
is,
think what the plan was then.
We had public meetings listed for
it's 2 days.
2 days in a row. Was there a reason why we need 2 days? Did we feel we weren't gonna get through
Well,
all
that's
the?
why I'm asking, did we, maybe we planned, I can't remember what we
Second and
planned,
fourth.
that we had 2 public meetings, so we got the most amount of people we hoped we could get. And they would give you feedback, and then from those, we would then take the roadshow, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
After you made some adjustments. So, I don't, if they're 2 days in a row, I think that's fine.
Okay,
So
maybe it was
Thursday and a Friday would work?
Fridays
Yes,
would not work.
Okay.
Right, so it'd have to be Tuesday and Thursday that week, the 2nd and the 4th.
Well,
Tuesday or
Because
Thursday.
council, you have the
Council's
3rd,
on
right?
Wednesday, and now, that doesn't mean we can't meet when there's a council meeting, it just means if council
Well,
liaison.
no, but that council meeting is 4 to 6, so, or 4:30, yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, so
That's
it
true.
could be
Oh, it could
that
be the third and the fourth, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
So that should work.
So, okay, if that can work and move that up a week, then you need the time to prepare, you know, roughly a
Any
week.
changes, right?
Right, the third and fourth, so that means we can start the neighborhood meetings as early as, let's say, the 11th.
Well,
How many neighborhood meetings?
What meetings in the first week of June?
Two community meetings.
We had two community
community
meetings
outreach
that are,
Right.
The concept alternatives.
let's say, over at the pavilion or something, city, town-wide.
Right. So big
Come-
community pavilion
People
meetings.
come, right, people
You come to us,
Then thereafter, the meetings that are held in
the
people's
neighborhood
homes
meetings,
are gonna be.
up to 6.
Right, about a week later,
Right.
starting about a week later.
Correct. So the week of 1st through the 5th. The 5th's out because it's a Friday.
Right, so
Right.
The
the
3rd, there's a
and fourth.
council meeting.
Well, the third, as Rick
They say
pointed out,
you're done by
To
6.
go right up.
Yeah, we could go right after.
right,
You can have it.
or 6:30 or 7,
Right.
7 to 9.
Park and Rec will be there at their meeting as well, so. Yeah, okay.
So you could do those third and the fourth.
Right, so you can start the neighborhood meetings as early as, let's say, the 11th.
Is
That's
that
too
enough
soon.
time?
That's too soon.
Well,
Yeah, I was
how
gonna
long
ask.
is- how- it's
You could do
question
the
is-
Yeah, that's the
neighborhood
question
meetings.
for you.
Question is
Following week,
Pauline
on the
and Adams,
18th,
what do we
17th,
need to
Yeah,
do
the
to
15th,
balance
16th.
it?
Yeah, right,
Get
exactly.
a good narrative and a good
I think you're right.
presentation, because we don't wanna rush this. I mean, we do wanna get it in before the 4th, but we don't wanna have a bad.
Right.
We don't wanna
Right.
mess you up.
I'd say you start the neighborhood meetings on the 15th and run
Right.
for the next 2 weeks.
Right, that's right.
And that
The
gives you a
neighborhood
week and
meetings,
a
you
half,
can have a neighborhood
almost 2
meeting
weeks.
on
Yeah.
Friday, we did last, we did them all day, we did them all.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
What was the
we did
Friday
them.
one? Was it for them?
I have it, it's scheduled.
I just wonder.
Yeah, they were all pretty well attended.
We know how many people came to each of
So,
them.
how do you guys feel about that?
15th is fine, which is, it's not a full 2 weeks, but it's
No.
better because we have a weekend.
Right.
So that is a
It's
Monday.
about a week and a half, a little more than a week and a half, between a week and a half, 2 weeks.
And then is this, tell us, is it, would it be boards? Like what kind of,
That's what we did
boards?
last time, we did.
Okay, and that's the
we did
right
like
kind of
3
meeting?
boards. We did options the last time when we did the
Okay.
neighborhood.
Okay,
But this time you're gonna be presenting kind of a concept.
right.
Building
Right.
plans, I imagine we're gonna
Well,
say, here's
A
the
and B
library
concepts.
plans.
Do you have to have
More
an
than
option?
one concept.
I agree with that.
Okay, yeah, I guess.
You know, from
Yeah,
the
did
2
you say
big
it?
meetings, we may
Two
not get
options?
down to 1, so I think it'll be refinements of A and B concepts right on the back.
Mhm.
Great.
And for most of these people, it'll be the first time to see it.
You're talking about the first 2 meetings.
No.
We're talking about the roadshow meetings.
Okay, I got you,
Yeah,
okay.
well, up 2. That's what the scope called for, was 2.
Two?
Two alternate concepts.
Yep,
And how many of these meetings that week?
5 or 6.
Five.
Oh,
I don't know, it's on the.
We have-
There was one that's
Five.
specifically for the library, in the library. We wanna do specific, we wanna get the library groups to come to the library and have their own presentation. So we get.
Right. That's good.
I don't know. They're not smart about it. I think the boards would be.
Okay, I think we can figure this out, yeah. We'd want
Okay.
enough time to
The
probably
Friends of the
do
Library
boards and whatever
is-
other little
I
things
don't know.
that
I've
might make
scheduled
sense.
a design session.
We're thinking a little model might be good, just because it's a very
Physical model,
treat,
yeah, we're talking
you know, it's very
That'd be-
tangible
that'd be
thing, and
great.
that it's
Stand
not
over
too
the-
specific and,
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's really showing the location vis-a-vis the street,
yeah.
and, you know, you have to dash in the water line there.
right, you should somehow mark that on a,
So it sounds like if we could confirm the dates at our next CCAC meeting,
Right.
then we could go out and find 5 or 6 people to host these things on
In different
specific
areas of
dates and
town.
times, yes.
So we
Yep.
need to do that by the next meeting then, to pick
Yep.
one of those days, okay. Okay,
We'll take it out the one that will fundraising meeting.
and I have a question about the programming, you know, it shows the activity of your programming preparation and then the public meeting there too, item 38 and then 40, public meetings.
Those are meetings with us,
Oh, okay, okay.
and that, you know, it'll involve the chief and maybe bring
Okay.
a couple of his staff.
So And
Tom, and, you know, if he wants to bring somebody.
Okay, so.
It's public in the sense that every one of these meetings are public.
Right.
Okay, so it's not okay, I didn't quite
I
understand.
mean, if any, you know, if you want to invite a couple of people that are really excited about the Civic Center, there's plenty of chairs.
So once we get the programming, we'll have how many days, it looks like 11 days to review it, or, I'm looking at the days here.
And these are-
What are we getting, and then when are we getting it, and how long do we get to have it to review? I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out.
We should probably have the program information able to be presented, you know, so I could send it out, which is 3 days before the meeting. So that you have the time to just look at it, read it, and then you can ask informed questions.
So that would be before the next meeting, CCAC
Well,
meeting.
I assume it'll be discussed at the next meeting.
Which is May 4th or something.
Yeah, Monday, May 4th. So if I'm looking at this right, we have our regularly scheduled meeting on Monday, May 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, we have a meeting on Wednesday, April 29th.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not sure how
No,
that.
these aren't actual dates, as Paul was indicating. He's gonna be working with WRNS to
Right.
refine this,
Refine these agendas.
and we'll
Okay.
begin
So
to
for
plug in
38,
the actual
40.
meeting dates.
Those are flex,
Yeah, your meetings are set. You're the first Monday of every month.
Okay.
But are these additional meetings, that's what we're asking?
Is
Right.
that right?
If we need them as additional meetings, that's fine, but we can coordinate, we should be able to time them so that they meet on the regular meeting
Okay.
dates.
okay, thank you.
Right, that's what I'm asking too,
Yeah.
Paul, too, you
So
know.
the Monday, not the 29th, but the 27th of April is a standing CCAC meeting?
No, the meetings are the first Monday of
May.
Oh, so
First-
the
the
other
first
way.
Monday.
Right.
first
So
Monday.
that's why I was confused about this,
That
were you
sounds great.
proposing new additional meeting dates to review this? But it doesn't sound like you are right now.
No,
No,
Okay,
No.
Okay.
it sounds like before our next CCAC meeting in May, we're gonna get the program review. Okay.
Ding, ding.
and as you have these meetings, if we have today's meeting, and if we needed some information done by the CCAC between this meeting and the next, then we set another meeting 2 weeks out and schedule it based on that.
Okay, okay. So we're all squared away with scheduling, everybody, I can move on?
So our
You know,
next
we
meeting
need
is
to
Monday, May
decide at the next meeting for the neighborhood outreach and all that, and we're not scheduling any other additional meeting for CCAC.
Well, I think that's a good question. Let's just make sure nobody thinks that is there a subcommittee that anyone thinks needs to meet between now and the beginning of May?
Police,
we'll have
Well, we
that
won't have that
information
until 3 days
a
before the
month
next
from
meeting.
now, the program.
Don't think we need to reconvene that. Yeah.
well, we just keep adding to your, don't convene anyway.
Well, I'd like to see the new the programs first, before we start subcommittee meetings again. Okay, so we're not meeting as a subcommittee until we find out, until we review, their reviewed or revised programming.
Great.
Good,
That's
okay, so that won't happen until the next meeting. Okay, everybody, we're squared away. Okay, review next 2 months' tasks. Are there any tasks that we need to do?
That's a piece of cake. Sorry, I'm being sarcastic over here.
Okay.
Sorry.
That we need to do to help you get your work done, that we're holding you back or not holding you back? I mean, I guess that's the first
Well,
question.
you will have the programming review.
Right,
at
and
the
next month, right. So is there anything else that you can think of that's
Not
going
before
on?
that. I
And
think
then
when-
the water line. of course.
Yes, I think when we come back together, we'll want very specific.
Okay.
But your thoughts.
Okay.
So that narrative again could be clear and.
Okay.
things they're not
Did you
saying.
get what you wanted today from
I
the
think
big
so,
picture?
just bigger conceptual questions about orientation, adjacencies, that were very helpful, so.
Yeah,
thank
really.
you.
Great.
Okay. Okay, committee and staff member comments, EIR status.
We have given all of our comments to the consultant, and the draft EIR should be back to us within a week. And we're scheduling a public meeting before this august body on May 4th, so that'll be an item on the agenda. And your purpose of that is not to comment and tell people, no, we can't do it, but, you know, take input. Listen to them, thank you very much for your input, because the consultant consultant will then have to take all of those questions, issues, and everything else that was raised as part of the draft EIR and respond to those comments as part of the final EIR. And we'll have a 60-day period during which the EIR input process is open.
This is
And when does
gonna
that-
happen in the May 4th meeting, we're not gonna have enough time.
When does that start? That's my question. Is that May 4th?
May 4th, I think we have it scheduled at 5:30.
I'd put it first on the agenda. I don't think there's gonna be a lot of VIR comments.
So we could make it at 4:30.
And then you'll finish that and then,
Well, I hope so.
we'll get a neighbor or two from over here
Right.
with respect to the cell tower. We'll get a couple with respect to environmental issues. Pretty much the same crowd that came out at the last one. It was about 5 or 6. It should go rather quickly.
I've talked about the water line.
Exhaustively. And it's still a mystery to me, so okay. So, before we adjourn, once more, we're kind of leaving you for a month, and I know you're in contact with Gordon and Paul and other staff, but if there's any other questions, please, in the interim, please go through them, and, I'm sure we would all chime in and help, and, with outreach and everybody else, so don't, just because we meet once a month doesn't mean that you're without information for a month.
Let me ask,
Great. I might.
you obviously taken copious notes here. Are you gonna put some kind of written document together that you can send?
Like summary,
Yeah,
all
just
of
kind
those
of,
comments.
here's the points we heard.
Okay.
I don't wanna create more work for you
Yeah.
than you were, but if you do, if for your own purposes, and if, what I'm thinking of is Steve and, Elizabeth and Clive that aren't here, I would, if you had something, I would send it out to everybody. I don't want you to do anything beyond what you had planned to do.
Right. No, typically, we summarize for our own internal use, absolutely, our own record keeping, so.
And
It's
if
up to-
and if you don't mind, just send me a
I don't
copy.
mind spelling errors and grammatical
Yeah.
problems.
I'll
Just
check all
there.
that.